My name is Henry Smith-Miller, and we have a room full of consultants. We could go through them, or we could introduce to them, or we could address that later. I know that you've seen our slideshow, and we put it together for you. I'm going to say some things that are actually special to this project, which is that it started as an air conditioning fix-up. We thought that was a pretty good idea. We went there and we found that the conditions were pretty miserable for the animals and the humans. I'm going to refer to our constituents as animals and humans, although humans are animals. There's a difference. The other thing about this project is it's a rather expensive event because we're actually building a hospital facilities. It's sort of 50-50, a hospital for animals who are not toilet trained. So in addition to all of the medical facilities, we have a special kind of sanitary problem. So I'm going to go over that. We are close to being on budget, and I'm going to run through this in 8 minutes. I think you know where it is. It's East New York. We had another project here where we were doing low-cost housing. It was not successful, but I realized that this portion of the city is improving. And we have to think about this project lasting for 40 to 50 years. For that reason, then I chose especially durable materials, which I'll go into. Anyway, it's at the junction of a boulevard and a street. Our plan essentially moves the parts around like a tic-tac-toe plan, which is something we got from an animal care architect. This is the Hotel Bliss. This is Linden Boulevard. This is Shepherd. The building actually the current building occupies one corner of a 4-square lot. For some reason which nobody understands, this part of the project was leased or sold, leaving separating the 2 parking lots, and this was an existing building. So unfortunately, that was not a great idea to have Hotel Bliss there. There has been efforts in the past to improve the entrance sequence. Oh, this was a kill shelter. For those of you who may not know what a kill shelter means, if the animal doesn't find a parent or adopted, within 3 days it's euthanized. This policy no longer exists in the city of New York, and we're better for it. Never mind, that's the Hotel Bliss, which is by the Hour Hotel. It's in an industrial neighborhood. The parking lot is actually on the boulevard, which puts the building back, so it's not very visible. We have one tree. Nancy Owens is here. Basically, it's a series of alterations. This is the existing building I mentioned. There's service and visitor parking. They're separated by the hotel. This is how it's going to be. I'm going to try to give you some interesting information about it because I thought that adoption was much different than admissions. And so I wanted to have a pour door in the facility because I thought there was something not so good about abandoning an animal. And the ACC said something to me which I'll never forget. Those 2 operations are exactly the same. We care about the animal, we care about the humans, but we treat somebody who can no longer maintain an animal, it can be admitted. And if somebody came that wants an animal, we do that too. So I made actually 2 doors that are identical, 2 reception areas, and the process, the filtering going through this is very complicated. It's like a courthouse. These are changes. We were asked to, so I touched on them very lightly because I think we want to talk about the pergola and lighting and the environmental effect of that. The rooftop, we're supposed to have these. This is existing. This is as it will be. So basically, all the facilities move across into the parking lot and the pergola. But we don't need to go through this. 8 minutes is short, so anyway. It's a pretty ordinary building. Actually, I was thinking that we could have an ordinary building. This is not the Whitney Museum. I'm a fancy designer, but why don't we deal with the aesthetic of the warehouse? Unfortunately, we got paired with the most amazing artist, who will talk later, Lake. Initially, there's no art in this project, so I took my cue from 42nd Street, where there are exterior stairs with a mesh to keep people from jumping off the stairs. The mesh is not your average kind of like football field mesh. It's a highly designed stainless steel, very elegant. It's like a piece of decoration and somebody has a real use. So more and more of the same stuff we have to show. Let us deal with this. There was some worry about the mechanical equipment being visible from the street. It's barely visible. You'll notice that I modified the rail here. This is something that Tommy and I do all the time, because we really are not interested in showing the defensive qualities of the pipe rail and roof. I don't find HVAC equipment so terrible. If you look at the new Whitney, there are 5 condensers at the roof, very carefully organized. All right, more of this landscape. I think you've seen the schemes. There's a screening of the existing wall here. There's some things that I want to go through in the section here where we have planters that tie into the canopy. This is the material that we originally posted to show you, and the same thing. It's a ground-faced concrete block with a very elegant stainless steel mesh. We used that material in 2 United States border stations at the Canadian border. So now let's get to what it's going to be like. This is where we were before Lake showed up. You know, the mesh, the car, the gates, the block, the actual outdoor courtyards on the 2nd floor, which actually afford places for exercise. The canopy, and then you can see something happening in here, which I think is absolutely vital and a perfect pairing between my more acerbic idea of a building dedicated to hygiene and hospitals. There is this amazing blast of color, and you can see them coming in. There's mysterious animals here and here and behind the stairs. This is a really key image. This is looking from the boulevard. And we put a kind of super graphic on the building. This is BACC. But the key thing of this one, and we worked very hard today to actually protect the mural that acts as kind of a welcoming gesture as a sign. And actually, we changed it. The dog and the cat used to be looking different ways. But the dog is on the 2nd floor and the cat's on the lower floor. So as a participant, without saying animal hospital all over it, we have a kind of intriguing building that projects a kind of elegance and material sensibility, and of course the art. This is again, so we're very careful to use a mesh here that we'll be able to see through. And of course there's dogs and cats. The canopy is something that I know you're concerned about. We're concerned about it. We did a canopy like this in Tariff, Colorado, where I cut a hole in the canopy so you could see through to beyond. This is the loading dock and the mural again. Nighttime, I'm going to get to the canopy in a minute. We realized that this thing is going to be a beacon at night. So we were very carefully studying how it would be lit. It's a tough neighborhood. I was told by the superintendent never to walk to this building. It's currently from subway because people are knifed regularly every week. So that's going to change with gentrification of the neighborhood, and this is a harbinger for the future of East New York. Okay, my 5. I got 8 more. I've got a few more minutes. The canopy shelters visitors from rain on the sidewalk. It harvests rainwater for planting and building sidewalk, which we're working with Nancy on now. It visual connection from 2nd floor offices to the parking lot and sky. What you don't see from, because of the canopy, is the ugly, bland warehouse on the south side of that areas. Okay. Allows for solar gain. Now this is really key, and I have to say it's serendipitous. I'm thinking sort of visually, and then we made some diagrams, and we realized we set up the canopy to be at the prescribed angle for the solar manufacturers to harvest the most amount of solar energy. So what happens, because in the winter the sun is low, and when in the summer when the sun is high, it actually adds to keeping the building warm in the winter and cools the building in the summer. So I say something here which is really key. Coherent, singular, and efficient platform for solar array, not requiring any additional building structure or roof membrane. Now that's me being very technical. But basically the building is so heavy because we have to make it out of masonry. It's a concrete frame that the addition of the canopy clipped onto the frame did not increase the number of rebar that we put in the building frame. So it's more efficient for us to attach this canopy and the solar panels to the frame rather than put it on top of the building and have columns going through the roofing membrane. So this is the little diagram. First we showed somebody standing here, and as you can see, you're going to see this guy in a piece of the building, but interestingly enough, you're going to see the parking lot. Of course, we would make a diagram like it, but this is it, from full parking. Okay? There's somebody sitting down, kind of same effect. This is the key one for me, because it was a kind of bonus that I didn't realize. So in the summer, the sun is high. So this piece of the canopy actually shades the window, where the light comes down, right? You don't want the sunlight in the offices in the summer. But in the winter, when it's cold, believe it or not, and this is the scale, this is the Rhino model that we built. It comes in and hits the floor, and will bounce off the floor to the ceiling. So this canopy, although it's not typical to DCAS's idea of putting them on the roof, we feel that the argument is sufficient to endorse it. Oh, I forgot the thing. Water comes off the canopy. We have a gutter here. We've made it smaller. The gutter returns to a chain and drops into the planter. Thank you, Nancy. The planter here keeps the car from running into the person on the sidewalk. Self-irrigates. So this canopy is working overtime on lots of different ways to service the building. We are looking at canopies that are semi-transparent. We're not there yet. We don't want to design something that is exclusive or proprietary at this moment because we think the project can survive without this transparency, but we show it to you anyway. This is a view taken. We added animals and cars and sky. So this is actually a real view taken from standing up next to the window. Here's Lake coming in. And I have to say, we worked with artists in different situations, but when he brought the kind of vitality of these very large-scale murals, which are very durable materials to the project, I personally was thrilled. Here you can see that the spots that we provided at certain times of the day, actually the daylight gets to the building. This is a key moment. This is something we did at Corning. We had condition at Corning's museum where they had Steuben, which is high-end retail, directly opposite from the cafe, which is cheap coffee. And the people at Corning said, we can't do that. Steuben is hundreds of dollars per unit and coffee is 50 cents. So we found this material, which is a kind of it's a film that you put inside glass. And when you look at it, it becomes opaque or clear. Toshiko Mori did that on the project in Soho. We actually did it at the same time. So this is sitting, it's a picture looking from the adoptions lobby to the admissions. This is one of the pair of doors. Later you're going to see that there are a pair of reception desks. Remember I talked about that equal treatment. And at 90 degrees, when you get in and sit down, you can't see the other lobby. But when you come in or when you're standing at the desk, because there's a necessary, we've talked about economy of means, sometimes we don't have both desks manned by receptionists. So this particular film, when seen obliquely, allows somebody to see both entrances. We keep the profile and the wonderful energy of the mural here. And as you can see, this is adoption, and this is admissions. So that it's almost like a Borges story. There are two kind of things going on here about the same member of the animal race, and we're really happy about that. Nighttime, you have to think about the lighting, and I purposely set the reception area back from the edge of the building so that the glass was always in shadow, so we don't get the glare and reflection that keeps you from seeing what's happening. Here you can see Lake's wonderful murals, providing what I call a dash of color in our rather straightforward kind of book. And I think that's it. I'd like to answer questions if you have any. I think that was 8 minutes. So that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, thank you for elaborating on the solar canopy. Seems as if you really have made one element do multiple things, which is quite remarkable. So I think that makes it very good. I think the addition of the super graphics and the mural are give it that wonderful kind of surprise element that is yet, I think, somewhat contextual. So.
Me too. I was really surprised when it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, architects tend to be very conservative, minimal, you know. And first, we had a discussion with the ACC about the identity on the street. But the best thing was when Lake came in the door. And normally, architects don't get along. We know him through an ex-employee of ours, so we were prepared to meet. And we're thrilled by the project.
Yes, I think it's. So, can you just say again, the perimeter fence material was revised to be 4 inches gridded mesh from, I hate to say this, but I don't remember what was there before.
Okay, I had specified everything should be top dollar. All right, that's how we like to do that. And I'm going to find a picture of this, by example. Okay. I think the best one is, this is a 4x4 welded wire mesh. Initially, we had this stainless wire, like chain mail, stainless. We used that at Champlain, the land port of entry, and we also used that material in Messina because it provides a kind of, it's defensible, but it's also elegant. It's not the kind of thing you see around a ballpark. So we have actually 3 things going on in the project. We have the very high tone American-made mesh. There's a German company. And we have that actually in front of the windows and also in the courtyards to keep the animals from jumping out. And we didn't want to have a fence. I have to speak only for myself. Basically, we've been concerned with the idea of barriers and the fact that architecture needs to be accessible. And when you put a fence up, we tend to turn it into a seat. When we have a handrail, we push it out of the view, or in this case, where we have the courtyards upstairs, it's a full height mesh. So there's no handrail. Well, a handrail will keep a dog from jumping over it anyway. So my first cue was to think about the constituents and how it could be open, yet defensible. The second one, it was a little bit of a comment about the neighborhood. It's an industrial neighborhood. Most of those buildings have really ugly, regular grates in front of windows. I thought to turn this necessity, the short term and the long term necessity, into something elegant. So it would be like an accessory when you put something. When I put a watch on, I have a really elegant watch. It makes me look good. In this case, we had an ordinary building, but I wanted to bring this wonderful material, which by the way reflects light differently all the time because it's a twisted thing. It's kind of like.
I don't think it's necessary about the material, but it doesn't need to be 10 feet tall.
Well, where is it?
Right. That's the
Right, and also, is it the same material over the I mean, a
Okay,
kid
now I'm
can
gonna
get
answer.
through 4x4 and took in a teacup dog.
No, where we have animals inside, it's the mesh. I can't crawl up it. And if we have a detail that you don't know about, we have a rolling top. That if an animal gets to the top and puts his or her paws on it, it falls back. It's part of the language of animal care centers. When I was talking about this versus this bit up here, all right? Initially, we had a very expensive material at this level. And basically, we're going over to a 4x4 welded wire mesh. It's not a stretched scrim.
Got it.
We have it at the pergola in the back. We are advocating now the same thing, to take to a 4x4 welded wire mesh rather than a stretched scrim, because it's a utilitarian building and we feel that aesthetically it carries the same message. That is going to be rendered in a galvanized finish.
But do we need 10 feet on the sidewalk?
Well, that's a good question. It's actually less than 10 feet, right? Tell me how high it is from here to the ground.
10 feet.
No, here. Right? The gate is lower, right? Say, you dropped it down 8.
8 feet.
Yeah. So, that's my answer.
Yes. Thank you.
I can show you one other picture. This talks about the difference in materials. This is a high tone mesh.
Yes.
This is the 4x4 access area to the mechanical.
Anyone else have any questions?
I like the artwork too, the color, I think works well. Is it only cats and dogs in the
We
artwork?
Being presented.
We got the
Oh,
artist
yeah,
here.
yeah. The only comments on the building
Yeah.
artwork is next.
Sorry, this is here.
I think we're ready for the artwork.
Okay, we're pleased to present to you all. And ladies, we don't have the murals in the model, but we intend to make them. We can't make them mosaics, which is well, it started as an air conditioning job. You know, we're known to be able to fix things. And there's a person in the room that needs to be recognized, who's our animal care architect. And we were trying to plan this, and he said, listen, Henry, it's easy. Build an addition on the parking lot that deals with the animals to our building. Because you only want to move them once, and they're really expensive. So I said, okay. Then he said, once you've done that, move the humans into some, what they call them, trailers, because they go home and shower at night. And then, when you're through building the thing for the animal-centric building, build an addition to the addition for the humans. Get factorial. So we did it. And so as a harbinger of what's going to happen we think it's a good investment. And here's the really bad news. We put the building on the corner of a street and a boulevard. McDonald's would love to be there. We made a through parking lot, which is hyper efficient. It's not 2x8. So we increased the value of the city's inventory. I would like to think it was the design, but I'm sure somebody in the mayor's office that knows about real estate said, hey, if we manage to do what we're supposed to do, which is mitigate the crisis with the animals, we can sell it to somebody else. And that's the truth. I think it's a beautiful project, and I think that we should hear from the artist, because he made it 100 times better. Okay,
All right.
I can't do more than that.
So yeah, my name is Untitled. I go by Lake. Excited to be here to present this project. It has been a very awesome collaboration with Henry's firm. And so I will start with some of my previous artwork just to give you a little bit of precedent and context, particularly how it relates in terms of like color palette, my visual language, aesthetic. So this is a 50-foot tall sculpture that I did in 2007 for Coachella. It's called Crown Ether, and I'll just kind of breeze through them pretty quickly. This is a building wrap that I did for a building called The Ark, which was in Opa-locka. It's about 20 minutes outside of Miami. It's an arts and recreation center. This is just a small sculpture I did with Socrates Sculpture Park called Conditions of Exile. And this are a series of 4 sort of 10 to 12 foot tall bench installations called Protest. It's in downtown Cleveland. It was a 1-year temporary installation in public squares, so you can see it on a normal day. And then during several of the major protests that took place, so like 2 levels of the activation. And then this was a window installation in downtown Brooklyn, commissioned by Brick. So you see it's a blend of a kind of vinyl storefront decal, as well as a hanging sculpture. And then this is a building, architectural mesh, 70% architectural mesh on a garage building in Durham, North Carolina. It's called Durham Continuum. It's part of the Smart Vision plan to revitalize the downtown neighborhood. So you get a sense of kind of very bright, simple, kind of bold color graphics for this sort of public artwork. And then this is a mural back in 2016, the Keep the Sheep campaign in the Twitter headquarters. And then this was another mural for Starbucks in Bed-Stuy. Again, the kind of blocky, colorful aesthetic. It's sort of very vivid and bold. So the project site, I'll breeze through these because
We've all seen them
already. Yes, literally the same slide. Brooklyn, East New York, Linden and Shepherd, existing photographs, existing plan, and the projected plan, and then my artwork proposal. So the idea very much about really amplifying the notion of adoption, really playing up that kind of relationship, particularly with the humans and kind of the animals, and that's sort of the objective of ACC, the client, as well as really marking, and we went through the kind of neighborhood and what it looks like at this point, sort of industrial area, but really marking this building in kind of attractive way on both facades that face, both street-facing facades, Lincoln Boulevard, Shepherd Avenue, with the idea of really directing individuals then back around towards the entrance. So there's artwork that features both in the exterior as well as the interior, and it kind of transitions into. This was just the initial proposal. I always work in terms of like a sort of body or visual library or kit of parts that then can be specifically fine-tuned, and much of that was done in collaboration with Henry's office and a few design charrettes, really figuring out where the artwork would really resonate in terms of the project as well as in terms of the architecture. So again, as I mentioned, there's exterior and interior, using several different materials. Interior is sort of the transparent film. Exterior, these perforated aluminum panels, as well as glass tile mosaics that you see sort of in the subway platforms. So these are their locations. And again, these are the exterior locations. And so here it is in elevation, and here is that rendering featuring the exterior mesh, exterior cellway enclosed, very colorful. It's so you were asking about whether it's cats and dogs and rabbits, but primarily focusing on cats and the adoption of cats and dogs. Again, came out of a conversation, with Henry's office as well as the graphic designers. So the graphic has a large BACC, so the idea of kind of really working with that relationship. And so this is Linden Boulevard, and again, a night rendering, kind of really illuminating, drawing attention to this facade, but then turning the corner onto Shepherd Avenue, and then having a kind of smaller but colorful graphic that kind of bring you around the corner that is placed over so kind of very playful, whimsical, placed over the architectural mesh on these perforated aluminum panels. Then which brings you to the kind of piece de resistance, they say, on the pergola as well as the entrance facade. So there's a very kind of large run of these aluminum panels before then transitioning to glass mosaic tile. And both as a sense of kind of, transitioning towards the interior artwork where the color palette is a little bit more subdued, again, to really work both in concert with ACC's branding identity as well as not really, conflicting or confronting with the wayfinding signage inside. So it kind of moves from very bright and colorful, primary color palette, then slowly shifts to a slightly more muted palette with the glass, mosaic tile that actually sits in the building facade. So this is pulled back a little bit. So again, it's a very long landscape, sort of mural graphic, again, featuring dogs, cats, their human owners, and kind of the sort of relationship between the two. And then from this view, you can see how it works as well with the buffer, created by the planters. So it creates a kind of nice zone where, individuals can sit outside. So there's really a sort of moment there as you move towards the lobby for admissions and adoption. And again, that color palette really shifts. And we went through various iterations of these to really figure out how to differentiate the two, not just switch the material for, no other reason to keep, to keep the same palette, to really try and transition towards the interior. And so here is a plan of the interior artwork. You can see, as Henry mentioned, separation between the admissions and the adoptions. On the first floor is the dog kennels, and then on the second floor is a cat house. And so you see that elevation there as well. And so that's sort of what the graph would look like. And again, we mentioned a very cool thing happening with the vision control film where you stare at it directly, it is opaque. But then if you stare at it from an oblique angle, then it becomes more transparent. But the artwork kind of remains visible and present. And again, this then shifts down to a two-tone color pattern, a half-tone pattern. It's sort of commensurate with the branding colors of ACC and the wayfinding signage on the interior. Then moving to the location on the first floor, the dog kennel. And again, the vision control film is not in this treatment, so this will just simply be a transparent glass surface. And then moving up to the cat house graphic on the second floor, and again, you can see the elevation in relation to the rest of the building. And then you have that graphic there. And so these are the three primary materials. We're looking at this alto grade perforated aluminum panels that use what is called a sublimation process. And so what that does is actually bakes it into the aluminum, so give it more of a longer life, so it's not like it's painted on. And then the glass mosaic tile, which, as I mentioned, is sort of a nod to the kind of subway art that you see as well, which would then sit directly into the face of the building as you transition towards the interior. And then the transparent film, which I believe would be sandwiched between panes of glass.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, we're interested in durability.
Yeah.
So the fantastic thing is, in each one of these cases, especially the interior, is everything gets cleaned all the time.
Yeah.
So the art and the film is embedded in between two pieces of glass. That, I like to argue on multiple cases. Actually, we need to control the sound between these two different activities, because when somebody's bringing a dog or animal in for admissions, the animal may be barking, maybe unhappy. When you're picking up an animal, you don't want to hear about the stress of the other operations. So this is the most loaded piece of work in the project, is the two lobbies and the wall in between. And you should go backwards. I want to talk about the ear thing.
Well, let me just finish with the maintenance and then the color, and then
okay.
Yeah.
There's something about this that's super special.
So yeah, so this is the color palette. Again, we saw a lot of samples from the other work. Really liking the kind of very bright, very simple primary color panel, and then moving into the interior palette, which is a very dark, light half-tone pattern. And then the glass mosaic is sort of like a slight tint and color shift between the two. And then just the maintenance, everything is pretty easily maintained. just wipe down with a little bit of soap mild solution, cleaning for the panels, the glass mosaic tiles, as well as transparent film. Of course, the glass mosaic undergoes any kind of chipping, it have to be replaced, but the sort of way that's created is abstract quality to it as well, so replacing it's not really a difficult thing. So yeah, there you have it. Thank you.
Well, I mean, what's wonderful is that through whatever judicious planning, this art will have a major presence. And I like that it isn't just limited to one place, that it funnels through the building, through your arrival experience, your entry experience. I think it's going to become your friend, in that place. It's really lovely.
Thank you. I agree.
Can you show them the thing with the ear thing?
Okay.
There's something about this, because Alex Cornhill from our office said, wait just a minute. You're in adoptions and you're seeing a medical procedure. Maybe it shouldn't be that. And I said, no, you're wrong. When you're picking up a dog, you want to be sure that it's been vetted. So this works both ways. No, this is a discussion, and we've had such a good time working on this project, because first of all, it's a very happy topic. It's not like a garage for the sanitation department. But we have had these discussions, and the project continues to get better. And the observations of your committee about the scrutiny that you put on the canopy actually forced us to look more closely at how it operates. And as I said, it was serendipitous. I put it in because we've done it in Telluride. But when I put it in the context of this project, and by the way, it shades his work too. So I think that's almost all the pieces are really contributing to what will be a great project. So we're very proud to bring it to you.
Thank you. But anyone else? Manuel, Hank, Mary?
I guess for this image, actually, I find it hard to review this presentation. Is that like a dog?
You got it.
Yeah.
Okay, we work together to be not so literal,
Mhm.
because if we had a really literal photograph, supposing you came back the next time, get a new dog or something, and you saw the same old photograph. So I think Blake's genius is that you have to look at it carefully to understand what it is. And, I was having trouble with the ear thing. There's a word for that. And I think that actually, you're there, there's going to be the ACC's program of their own branding, with their own photography. We talk about where it's going to be and how it's going to change. But it's something that builds intrigue about being there. And of course, the architect would do that. I would want to do that. So I agree with you that it's hard to recognize, but once you've got it, you're in on the story. And that's what I want. He came up with this idea. So, if you think we should shrink it, you should have more. You see, the image actually goes from the door between the two. There's a big panel, and then it actually shows up in the lobby. If you think we need more profile, we'll shrink it.
No.
That's
Are you guys fine, happy?
Oh, I don't know. They can speak for it.
It's good.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. The Red Hook Library renovation will help to better serve the programmatic requirements, increase visibility of the branch, and bring light into the building and open spaces to views of the street. Stella Betts and David Levin of Levin Betts and Lynn Famscape will be presented.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having us come in and speak to you this morning. We're excited to talk about the Red Hook Library. It has a very key location in the grid of Red Hook. It is where the Walcott and White Street grids shift relative to the vector of Lorraine Street. So it sets up a couple of very interesting and very important for the design of the library vistas to the library from various aspects in the city. It is in a zone AE flood zone, which has a base flood elevation of 12 which then produces a design flood elevation of 13. The library's history begins in 1915. As far as we've been able to understand, it was an Italianate structure that burned, I believe it burned down in 1947. The current library was constructed in 1974, of a very different style.
Just briefly, these are some of the images of the existing library. This is from Walcott Street. The entry here, you can see it's a concrete structure with brick infill. Not a lot of visibility or transparency from the street. This is the corner of Walcott and Dwight. So you can see it's barely recognizable actually as a library. This is from Dwight Street, and then you can see into the rear yard here. These are the images of the rear yard. In this case, we're just going to be doing some replacement of the pavers. And then this is the garden on the northwest side, which has no connection currently. So when you're in the garden, you don't have any visual or physical connection to the library itself. It's in the side yard. So the existing site plan and the proposed site plan with the roof, I'll go through these quickly. This is the existing floor plan. This is the proposed floor plan. So this is Dwight and this is Walcott. The idea is to create transparency to the garden that's on the side here. So visibility, if you're on Dwight Street, you can see straight through the library to the garden, and creating much more transparency than what is in the existing library. So making these views across and then from Walcott Street as well. The roof plan, the existing building sections. We're going to talk a little bit about the idea that we're raising the height of the building to give it a little bit more civic presence. We'll show that in the rendering, so I won't spend any time on that here. And then the building sections. I'll go through this quickly. And then to the renderings themselves.
Images of the building from Walcott Street. The design is based on this idea of a brick skin, a wrapper, a high-performance, thermally performative energy skin with sort of a variegated brick pattern that we've been developing, shifting bricks, corbelling in and out. I'm going to show some details of that, as well as perforation. The primary design, or I should say one of the initial design moves, was to move the entry from its position here, farther west from the intersection of Walcott and Dwight, to and toward the corner, to really create this idea of visibility and understanding from these primary visual vectors in the neighborhood. The entry looks like this. The brick is wrapping around. The parapet is raised to give the building more of a civic presence, as well as to shield the mechanical equipment. We are studying photovoltaics on the roof in conversation with DCAS. This view from the entry is particularly important to this idea of the design and the confluence of streets here as it attempts to open up that corner as much as possible, while still providing for an expanse of solid walls for the library shelving. This view from Dwight Street also attempts to open up, as Stella was talking about earlier, a large aperture with visibility through to the garden. One would see through to the garden based on that correlative aperture on the other side of the building. This is looking northwest into that same window. Lynn's going to talk about the landscape strategy. There's this relationship between city, landscape, community, and then of course the life that goes on inside the library. These images of the studies of the brick talk about the corbelling of the brick, as well as solidity and perforation. The brick is based on a standard sizes from a concrete brick with recycled glass as the aggregate. These sizes, there's a standard long brick, a standard short, and then headers, if you will, that tie back into the back of the structure behind that allow us to create a pattern without having to cut any bricks as it moves along the long expanses of the face of the wall. When one then gets to the perforated area, the the middle-sized brick is simply popped out. And we've been having some interesting conversations with bricklayers who have been studying this and interested in the idea. The building will also have 2 gates. It's a very simple design concept coming from the brick study. We simply take the mortar joints, if you will, and then create a gate out of the same joint pattern in the adjacent brick. So it's as if it's a sort of a shadow of the brick itself.
The landscape design foregrounds ecological and hydrological function alongside a variety of social and learning spaces. We have 2 perimeter landscapes along White Street and Wolcott Street, and a prominent garden landscape on the west side of the building. And in the garden space, there's the flexible community room, which has access to the meeting rooms inside the building. We have a bioswale garden that showcases stormwater collection and vegetation. And then we have a reading room with a raised reading deck similar to an amphitheater-like seating, where you can participate and be immersive in the environment. And then along the perimeter landscapes, there's 2 primary functions. The Wolcott landscape is more open arms, sort of inviting. The geometry and forms really invite the neighborhood in. These are the NYCHA housings over here, and this is a townhouse over here. Differently, the White Street perimeter landscape is a little bit more immersive. It's cut in. But what both do is that they open up the right-of-way, public right-of-way, and invite people in. And then in terms of that invitation, we're also thinking about a material palette that blends between the existing public right-of-way right into the landscape itself. In the garden space, we're thinking of a more special landscape paving that takes the red hook brick and breaks it down with the colors and reinvigorates it and reinvents it to make this more lively and playful space. Connecting the 2 spaces with this bridge and this upper reading deck are composite decking, which we're thinking RPL for low maintenance reasons. And then we also have, along these planters, we have cast in place curbs that rise up into precast planters. I also want to mention that in terms of the ecological function and the hydrological function, these are performative planters that receive stormwater from the public right-of-way and within the landscape. And this is a bioswale that collects water from this reading room and these custom flexible area here. So these are some of the material selections which you can observe here. This exposed special precast paver within the main garden space. The tinted concrete paving that connects the right-of-way into the perimeter landscapes, and our ideas for the cast in place to precast pavers. Some amenities, we have fixed and flexible seating all around. We have a raised seating platform that is also a display shelf. We have this biosteel bridge, and then we have a garden gate, which David spoke about previously. Just some design intents with this. We're thinking about raising it to provide storage underneath. Quickly, the planting, we're thinking about a sassafras rim that wraps around to create a more immersive seasonal experience. Also, sassafras is a very playful plant with many different types of leaves, and then stormwater planting on the side. And these are collected from DEP and DPR plant palettes. Sassafras has proven to be really doing well from EPP, Woodland Ridge Park. And the American persimmon is the upper canopy tree within the perimeter landscapes. And these are within the bioswale planting palette. Also tried and true species in the DEP, DPR plant lists. And then I'll pass it along to you.
This is just the exterior lighting, so the building will be uplit with the LED lights. And then we can talk a little bit about the signage on the outside of the building, inlaid into the brick pattern, about 8 inches tall. These are the samples that are in front of you on the table as well, the concrete brick that David spoke about, and also the 3 different colors that are creating a kind of what we're calling a sort of salt and pepper pattern, very subtle as you can see in the colors, but just enough to mitigate a kind of flatness of one color of the brick that also plays with the core building itself. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
wonderful project. And especially the integration of the ground floor, the landscape, and the ground floor space is really nice. And the opening through the light through is great. And it's great that your library is going to be built outside. You know, how do you do that? So that's pretty exciting. I guess my main question had to do with, and I think you guys answered it here, but it was about, this low ceilings, like big building, low ceiling. So you have this beam, that you can't cut into, it's just, you can't even like pop it up anywhere.
Yeah, it's an existing concrete structure with these large girders. So right now, just from a cost standpoint, we're keeping the existing structure. So there's really no way to cut into that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point. I mean, it's a 24-inch deep by about 18-inch wide girder that supports these T-beam structures.
Right, but between that, you have a slab between the girders.
No, it's actually the T-beam. Can you go to the back to
that
the
section.
view from Walcott?
The existing?
I can show you the rendering.
Yeah.
This one right here.
Yeah.
Go back one.
Yeah.
You can just sort of see here.
Those are those T's that we saw coming out.
Basically, the building's a parking garage that books and people have been put into, and it has these deep concrete beams that are sitting on these concrete columns, and then the parking garage deck sits right on top of the beam.
Yeah, you can see, these big, so
Oh,
this is
so
one of the
that's-
perimeter girders, and there's one that runs on the inside, and
It's a
then
very
the
heavy
deck
bed
sits
with
on
very
top.
heavy girders.
Yeah.
So
and then-
currently, Estelle said that the budgetary conversation is, based on under.
Well, thanks
Yes.
for explaining that. And also, you can't go through it. I mean, it's also, I think the idea of opening up the brick is a really interesting idea to bring light in, but it's unfortunately it's up there, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
But it's a way to kind of relieve the big wall,
Right.
Yes.
right?
Correct.
So,
Yeah, to kind of give civic presence and to relieve it at the same time, if you will.
great.
What was my ask is, does it have to be identified as a working branch?
No, that's actually based on BPL standards, and it needs to say Brooklyn Public Library, and it doesn't, their signage does not have the location. Is that correct, Angela? Yeah.
So that graphic where you have it,
We'll just say Brooklyn
Into
Public
the
Library. It
brick.
doesn't- Yes, it
Yes.
doesn't say Red Hook.
then that material is,
Polished stains.
that's polished in this insert.
Correct.
Is it because it is a renovation, there's not like a percent for our designation?
There will be, that is, we're in the process of speaking with DCLA. They're going to putting together an RFP.
A question, what zoning district, what is the underlying zoning in this district?
Residential, which is why we can't do a digital sign. So there will be no exterior digital sign.
And I may suggest you will not be able to do tinted concrete sidewalk.
Well, so we're in conversations with DOT at the moment. We're looking to do a distinctive sidewalk here, but simple because it will be under BPL maintenance. We're thinking about just tinting the concrete so that it complements both the building and the cast in place and precast concrete selections that we've made. We're also using DOT specified manufacturer Scofield to make things a little bit easier for everyone. But we are in the process currently of talking about a distinctive sidewalk with DOT.
Which would still need approval from us.
Yes, yes.
Also, just a completely minor topic. Your street trees, are you adding any or you're improving those that are there?
We are, so we're also in conversation with DPR at the moment. These trees that you're seeing here, they are in a special circumstance where they're sitting directly on top of the property line, inset from the curb. So we are thinking of keeping these trees. There are two dead ones currently that are one is removed and one is in the process of being removed.
They're in this sort of foreground.
Yeah, so as of now, we are proposing to protect these trees during construction. How viable that is, we'll learn within the coming DD phase of what is needed to lift build this structure. But they are currently in, and we're proposing to expand the current tree grate to DPR standard, which is at least 5 by 10. Currently, they're just like little cobble 2 by 2. Yeah.
And where is the sign on the facade? Oh, there it is. On the side.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really a good move to relocate that entrance.
Yeah, it's very,
It's a very good move.
very good.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you very much.
Thanks very much. Nice job.
Which thing's gonna-
Okay.
Hi, I'm Nancy Prince from Parks, and we're here with NV5 and Jackson Wanderers, who's going to present a great new park for the Rockaways.
Okay, so I'm going to try and quickly take you through the proposed reconstruction of Michaelis Bayswater Park in the Rockaways. As you can see, all total, there's nearly $60 million for this project. It's a complete park reconstruction. The goals of the project are to A, reconstruct the park, which was badly damaged and completely flooded by Superstorm Sandy in 2012, and in so doing, making it resilient for future storms. We are anticipating sea level rise. And to take this opportunity to really give the communities a fantastic new park facility that they can use in all sorts of different ways. Here is where it's located, out in the Rockaway Peninsula. It's really a key spot on the peninsula. It's kind of like a hinge, if you will, between where the beaches extend to the west and the big, older community of Far Rockaway to the east. It's a real community gathering point. The entire park was flooded by Superstorm Sandy. Currently, most of the park, except for little bits of it where the ball fields are, get flooded in a 100-year flood, and in the 2050s, it's projected that a 100-year storm would entirely inundate the park. The surrounding area is mostly residential, mostly 1- and 2-family homes, but there are some large NYCHA housing projects just a few blocks away, so there's a lot of people nearby. The existing park is a mix of a lot of different things. There is this big inlet here, Norton Basin. There's natural areas on the southern piece of the park. There's shoreline with upland maritime forest, natural turf athletic fields, and then the high ground of the park, which gets up to an elevation of close to 12, 13 feet in this area, is all the recreational activities, which we'll see some pictures of. So our general approach here was not to build a wall around the park to protect it, nor were we going to just simply let it flood as it would normally flood over the years to come, but rather to come up with a design that somehow manages the stormwater and the floodwaters that are anticipated in the future. This was a kind of a concept that drove the design in the early stages. We called it Resist and Embrace. So some photos of the existing park. These are the two main points at which most people would enter the park. The subway is right down just behind where the photo on the left is taken from. And this is the intersection of Beach Channel Drive and Bay 32nd Street. And what you'll notice here is that in neither of these locations are there entrances to the park. Similarly, along the perimeter of the park, Beach Channel Drive down here has a continuous sidewalk and curb. Bay 32nd Street, which you see on the left, has a sidewalk but no curb. And parking is a real problem. They park on the sidewalk, cars get into the park. Over here on Norton Drive, we have curbs and we have sidewalk at the corners, but the sidewalk is not continuous along this entire length of the park. So this project will be building curbs and sidewalks wherever they are currently missing. Inside the park, there's a small sort of walled-in picnic area, 16 tables and rows. And then the big chunk of the park here is this sort of rectilinear grid of straight walkways and straight benches with a very nice bosque of existing trees that provide a lot of beautiful shade. There's a spray shower that functions, there's a playground that functions. And this is the master plan for the park, and what I'll do now is walk you through it in stages because there's a lot going on here. But suffice to say, there's only, with the exception of the brand new skate park up here, the entire rest of the park is being fully reconstructed. So first, on Bay 32nd Street, we're basically completing a street that DOT never finished building. They built half the street. They did not build the side of the street alongside the park edge. So we're putting in a lot of new parking, which the community requested, pedestrian refuges opposite each of the intersecting side streets. This is our new proposed entrance at that important corner of Bay 32nd and Beach Channel Drive. There's a lot of existing trees that we're working very carefully around, so we didn't have the entrance right on the corner per se, but just off the corner. And this is indicative of the design that we're proposing for each of the entrances. It features ornamental plantings, natural boulders, and a combination of asphalt paths with exposed aggregate pavement at the entrance points. And the Flushing Meadows pole lighting throughout the park. Jumping to the top corner of the park, there's a very low-lying area where 6 tennis courts currently exist that floods all the time, so we're taking those courts out of there. Based on community feedback, we're putting 4 courts back in this northern corner of the park. And directly out next to that will also be a new building for maintenance and operations division. They'll have a garage and a workshop in there and a little storage yard for materials. And we've designed the pathway system so that they can bring their trailer in that they do performances from, because there's a big athletic field right next to this where people gather for large events. In sort of getting towards the core of the park, we have a cluster of high energy recreational activities. The brand new skate park is just off the screen at the top. We're putting in a new adult fitness area next to 4 handball courts which are remaining from before. So there are 6 currently, we're taking 2 out. And what we're doing with that extra space is we're expanding the footprint of the basketball courts. Right now there are 3 undersized courts. We're putting in 4 full-size high school regulation courts. This is an overview of that particular area, looking back across existing baseball field to be refurbished, new basketball courts, 4 handball courts, and the adult fitness area is off to the left there. Where those original 6 tennis courts were, it's very close to the water. It's a low-lying area and it floods all the time currently. The courts are in very bad condition, so we're taking them out, as I said. And in its place, we're creating this landscape, which is a combination of, we're calling it the picnic mound because it's directly adjacent to our new picnic area, which you'll see in a minute. But it's also a low-lying area, so we're building in a lot of stormwater retention in the form of rain gardens. The athletic fields are all above this, and they kind of the water sheets down into this area. And that's a view looking back across the new picnic mound. We're going to get up to a height of about 15 feet here, so you will have beautiful views of the bay from the top. And it'll be ADA accessible. The shoreline is a major component of this project. We're going to be restoring the entire shoreline, restoring both the low marsh, the high marsh, going in and doing invasive species removal in the upland maritime areas, and very importantly, we're going to create 2 new boardwalk access points that are ADA accessible, so people can get off the main circulatory biking path, get all the way out to the marsh areas and the beach areas, and get really fantastic views of the water. In this slide, you can also see what we're doing with respect to resiliency. We have a berm. The high ground will sort of turn into a berm that shadows the shoreline, comes all the way down and around the bottom of the inlet. And at some point in the future, the Army Corps has plans to build another berm that's going to run west from this point. So at some point in the future, this entire system will connect up, and we'll have an elevation of 10, which will really keep the interior of the park dry and safe from storms. It's anticipated well into the 2050s and 60s. That southern tip of the park right now is just a pancake flat area of grass that floods on a regular basis. It's very low. But there are some nice big beautiful trees. In fact, there's a beautiful copse of trees at the very bottom. But I mentioned earlier, there's no actual pedestrian paths in this area, and there's no way to walk into the park from this bottom point. And the subway is literally across the street from here. So we're creating a new park entry, new walking paths, and some bermed up landscape along Beach Channel Drive that will sort of shelter people as they make their way through the park. So the recreational assets to the north.
Will that become an access point for people coming off the subway?
Absolutely. So DOT is looking at this big complex intersection now. They have plans to make it more, improve pedestrian accommodation there. So at some point, that will go in, and then our project will already be in place by the time they do their work, but we'll have this new entry point here. That's a rendering of that entry point.
I'm sorry, pardon my ignorance. Describe the surrounding area. Is it transitioning to residential? What's going on?
Yeah, there's...
The only reason I say that is because you're opening up
great space.
Mhm.
And if you want to encourage residential use,
Right.
you might not want great subway access because it changes the nature from playgrounds and so forth to what the park becomes for the local residents. I'm just curious.
Well, the idea is definitely to improve access into the park from this point down here, because as I said, there is a subway station just on the opposite side of this very large and complex intersection. Besides that, there is a neighborhood of residential single-family and two-family homes immediately to the west, and then just beyond that is a very large housing project.
With no public park space and no access to these types of improved facilities. So I'm asking again, would we want to increase access from the subway rather than trying to increase access from residential homes?
Well, we're doing both. We're actually doing both. So our plan is to put in a brand new sidewalk all along 35th Street Norton Drive. It does not currently exist. It also, the new sidewalk continues all the way down Norton Drive, so you get to the housing project at the far end of the street. So that's all new access that doesn't exist. This is a new entry point right here that also does not currently exist. Right now, the guide rail is continuous all along the edge of the park, so we're creating a new access point there as well. That's strictly for the community, so they can get into the park and get quickly into these new facilities that we're designing.
What you're building is great. It's great. It's an underserved population. It's not a decision that we make, so I just bring it up. Just
Well, that implies people would come by, that this is a regional destination, that people would actually take the subway to go into the park.
And people do, because there are large events held at this park. There's a large Caribbean Day Parade that happens here at least once a year that gets 6,000 to 7,000 people on a good day. So it's definitely a regional destination for the entire Rockaway Peninsula. So the subway access is important, but we're also doing absolutely everything that we can to make it directly accessible on foot from all of the intersecting side streets as well. So including working with DOT on new crosswalks and things like that. So that's that entry with benches, seating, flagpoles. We're using the timber guide rail at the edge of the park as opposed to a taller steel fence and that sort of thing, so it's more open. The picnic area we're very excited about because I showed you a photograph of the current picnic area a moment ago. It's 16 tables and rows jammed into a little footprint of space. We're removing all those walls and we're taking the picnic area into the park. This is that area that is currently just a big bosque of trees on a grid with long, wide walkways and long rows of benches. And we've turned it into this picnic grove under the canopy of these trees where all of the paved areas, which are currently concrete, will be replaced by either large areas of mulch or large areas of porous concrete pavers. So the entire area becomes permeable. Tables and chairs can go pretty much wherever they want to go. And most of these tables and chairs will end up being ADA accessible as well. That's just a view looking through that grove with the porous pavers and mulched areas. And the playground we're also extremely excited about. There is this area of grass and trees here. It's all existing. These are big mature trees with beautiful canopy. And there's some topography in there. We get up to a height of about 5 feet in the center of that area. So we've actually arranged our playground all the way around that central feature. And then the whole thing is ringed with a typical parks fence so that everything access is controlled at 3 specific locations. We have areas for 2 to 5 around the bottom and areas for 5 to 12 around the top. A lot of different features in here. We have a big, aggressive, exciting, boulder-themed climbing apparatus that leads up to a big rocky outcrop with its own slide and a ramp that makes your way up here at 5%, so it's ADA compliant. And then we have a spray shower at the bottom, 2 areas that are designed for 5 to 12-year-olds, a music area, swings for both age groups, and then over here a very large tree that we're preserving and putting a timber stage around the outside of it so the kids can perform or hang out or do whatever they want to do. So we've gone from about 15 or 16,000 square feet of play space in the existing park to close to 26,000 square feet of play space. And these are some views. This is just a change from the earlier submission where we've put this play ship into this space for 2 to 5-year-old kids. That's the spray shower area where you walk in. Just off screen to the right here will be the new comfort station. I've neglected to point that out on one of the overall plans, but we are putting in also a brand new Type 2 DPR standard comfort station. And we're making it a little bit bigger, so we can get even more toilets in it than the regular standard. Play features, rock outcrop with the slide. Sort of an overview of the whole thing. Fencing is absolutely as minimal as it needs to be, just around the playground. Where needed at the basketball courts, we're not going to completely encircle the basketball courts, handball courts, skate park, tennis courts, and around the little, what we're calling the M&O yard, the new maintenance building at the top. Planting, this is our approach to planting. Obviously we have a plant list, it's not in the presentation. It's a lot of plants because we're doing the shoreline, we're doing some woodlands, we're doing a lot of turf, but we're also doing some ornamental plantings at each of the main park entrances and some of the key nodes, like around the new comfort station, which is here, I should point out. And then those areas, these are the rain gardens and bioswales, which are picking up water that's shedding off of the baseball fields. And that's just a sort of bird's eye overall of the entire park. And that's the last image, so thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Excellent, really transformative, and what a luxury of space you have.
30 acres. We don't often get to look at 30 acres.
Thank you.
Thank you to all. The public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda, and we're today reviewing items number 27198 to 27244. Please note the conditions of approval as recommended by the various committees and recusals. Staff has noted my recusal from items 27208, 27214, and 27217. Are there any other additional recusals, abstentions, or no votes? And item that be?
27220, I'm abstaining.
As a no,
I'm abstaining.
abstain, okay? And abstention.
Yes.
Any other abstentions or no's? Commissioner Hopkins?
27220, extension.
Okay. So are there any others that we need to discuss? No. So would someone make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the conditions of approval as noted, and Commissioners Hawkinson, Williams, and Valverde's abstention from item 27220?
So Second.
Second. All in favor? Thank you. We have approved the consent agenda, and the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.